a lot of these guys who are saying that they're Israelites, you guys need to really take a DNA test, because if you can't go and get a snip and look at somebody who's from Arabia, because you should have markers out of those areas autosomally. If you can't get somebody who's been through these areas that Israelites have biblically been, if you look at the text and also look at extra biblical sources, then you can't say that you're an Israelite, because once we take the DNA test, we see that you're like 88% there's pure African. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it. But at the same time, if you're going to say you're an Israelite, at least have some of these markers that came out of the areas of what biblical Israelites were they geographically at. And they don't have
to. That's another thing I want to ask you is like, how do you feel about like a lot of the Hebrew Israelites that are calling like Africans disgusting, and like I think they should embrace their like African heritage, like where they come from, you know? Right. How do you feel about that being an African American? That's what I want to ask you.
I feel really bad about that, because at one point I used to do the same thing, and really it's really a thing of self-hate. And also you have to understand that when people have been taken into servitude or taken into slavery, they want to identify with something. And so because they want to identify with something, and I wanted to identify with something, that's the first thing to where I will identify with. Why? Because when you look at the biblical text, it explains servitude, not just from a black perspective, but from a perspective of human beings, of why human beings became servants in the first place.
Like right now, Nick's just answering an honest question. Like, so why don't they just connect to their African heritage or whatnot? And here's the false dichotomy. The false dichotomy is that connecting to that you can't be Israelite and African, or that an Israelite tradition is un-African, because they're negating the fact that there was an Israelite tradition in West Africa. So the assumption is that you're not an Israelite, you're West African. So just practice something that's West African and has nothing to do with the Israelite tradition. So this is where I got a huge problem with some of the, like, so this is where me and G-Con got to square something away. Yeah. And so G-Con, I'm going to search you out, bro, because we got to have this conversation in public, fam. We got to talk this one out. So I want to go back to something that was said. So my G Nick said, why don't they just identify with their African heritage or whatnot? Okay. So how many of them would be Christian coming from West Africa? How many would be Muslim coming from West Africa? How many would be Jewish coming from West Africa? How many would be practicing African spirituality coming from West Africa? How many would be practicing Reformed Christianity coming from West Africa? Absolutely zero. Absolutely zero. But you know what we can show? Hold on right quick. Let me do it to you like this. We can show via documentation that there were Christians in West Africa, but they had nothing to do with the Greco-Roman or Roman Catholic or Reformed Christian tradition. Nothing to do with it. And that they were living in Muslim lands and eventually converted to Islam. We can show this firmly in the Arabic sources in West Africa, recorded by the Muslims. I've shown this stuff on my channel multiple times. Yeah. we can clearly see that in West Africa, in a kingdom called Takrur, that there was a Christian part of West Africa. And y'all can pause this up and read this stuff as you want to. I'm not going to read this stuff. I'm just going to let it be in the background as I'm talking. But there's a Christian kingdom of Takrur that is rich in gold, so rich that they supply a Muslim king with so much gold that when he goes on Hajj and goes to Egypt on his way to Mecca, he drops so much gold that it affects the gold price for a decade. And that king says, yeah, like we can't make the gold mines produce. Like someone asked him, why don't you just go take the gold mines from the people in Takrur? He's like, nah. Like A, they're Christians there, but B, like we tried taking it before. And when we take the mines don't produce like when they have control of it. So we let them take control of it and we take the taxation basically. And they're so powerful that they're even being said to be oppressive in the area. That they're actually being able to push back on the Muslim dominance of the area. And this is before Western colonial contact. And this is an area. Takrur is in between Senegal and Mauritania. Now here's the inconvenient truth about these sources. These same sources talk about a Jewish kingdom to the south of Takrur called Lamlam. These same Arabic sources break down all kind of migrations from places like Yemen, etc., to where you see Jewish and Christian populations and whatnot. So when you go look at these areas where our people were taken from, what were they practicing? They were practicing Islam. They were practicing Judaism. They were practicing a non-Western form of Christianity. And they were practicing African spiritual traditions.
But I choose to walk in the spirit is difficult, dealing with all of the ignorance. But in the Bible, it's still talking about the Bible. What is the benefit? Everything about your counterfeit, there ain't no rebuttal you can counter with. On the internet, you the master teacher. In real life, you powerless. Keep it real with you, I don't have time for this. I ride for this, my forefathers died for this. They cry for this opportunity, presently I possess, and right now you are the opposite. If you walk in love, you fulfill the law. Don't get involved and you ain't giving it all. If you ever think it's cool to threaten another man's family, then you already lost. Chemtrails got aluminum, heavy metal saturate the atmosphere. Manhattan Project, time travel, Mandela effect, what happened here? GMO food processing to the whole world become obsolete. A black man who believes in Jesus, got my own team taking shots at me. You trespassing on property that you don't fully understand properly. All the back and forth, that's not for me, that's for ROC and the war machine. If we ride together, then we ride together. If we can't do it, I'd rather leave. I still stand on the word of God till the day I die and no longer breathe. We trapped inside the diaspora, nightmares of the massacre. Cold sweat, I'm below deck in the middle passage, just a passenger. Revolutionary hardcore, liberation, that's a hard job. You ain't ready, you a oddball. Keep your mouth closed like lockjaw. I learned trying to bring people together on the same page, make them separate. All the talk about reconciliation, when the time come, you hesitate. If Jesus was able to sit at the table with a bunch of sinners, you very fake. Your steps ordered by the Lord, and how it was yesterday, a big mistake. We the city sitting on the hill. Guess it all depends on how you live. Guess it all depends on how you feel, and we both know that ain't God's will. I stood on what I felt was right. I don't never question if God's real. Trapped inside this matrix, I'm about to pop the red and the blue pill.
Bless them which persecute you. Bless and curse not. Rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Be of the same mind one toward another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, said the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. Romans 12:14-21.